Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be talking a little bit about family misalignment when we have a diagnosis, a condition of dementia. And just to sort of set us up, Carolyn, your background in relation to family and dementia
is my own family. My mom and dad both lived with Lewy body dementia. I have professional experience as well, but I'm going to talk from the standpoint of a family, a care partner.
Brothers, sisters?
I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Royden.
Well, we cared for my parents. Both had cognitive decline late in life. Mom died in her late 80s and dad in their 90s. And I have a brother and sister that helped with that. And then my wife was diagnosed with young onset dementia at age 57. And we have 3 children, but none of them live near here. So, yeah, I was, well, I'm not going to say I was on my own, but I was the primary decision maker.
But as far as family discord goes, you're an example of somebody who didn't start off this process, at least with family discord, because your brother and sister and you were in alignment with your parents?
We were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But when it came to your wife, there was nobody to really work with initially anyway.
Right.
And that was at the same time you were doing your parents.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we had those parallel paths. Right. But yeah, with the kids in their 30s and living remote, the last thing I wanted was one of them to come home and try to help. So
that was more comfortable to have them not involved than to try to involve them at a distance or have them come back home to participate.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Regina, you and your family situation.
Yeah, so I had a special circumstance. Because I'm a healthcare provider, I was practiced as a PA. My family, who was caring for my grandmother living with dementia, would consult with me often, just because they felt with my clinical background that I knew everything about every
all the healthcare things,
right? But it was special because I was long distance. Okay. So I lived in Virginia and my family's in Pennsylvania. So a lot of my support was long distance.
Long distance. And how many family members, in addition to your dad, were there?
So my dad and my aunt, my dad's sister, and my uncle, my dad's brother, were a part of the care partners for my grandmother who was living with dementia.
And her husband wasn't alive?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Grandfather had passed away some years prior to her diagnosis.
Cool. All right. So we have 3 different stories, and I'll keep mine out of it. But what we're going to talk about are some of the key points, like identifying and treating the diagnosis of dementia, what to do with that, clinical trials, what kind of meds and how to use meds. When somebody has to have a procedure, do you do it? Do you don't for evaluation? How far do you go with something like a treatment? How about where someone gets care? When do you move? How do you move? Under what circumstances? How about how much care and who's going to give it? Like, they don't need that much. They need this much. They need this kind of care, that kind of care. Or maybe it's about finances or advanced directives, or maybe it's about end of life or palliative care. Let's start down with Carol. Let's start down with you. What would you say were some points where a lot of them, or just a few of them in your family, where there was really family dissent? It really wasn't.
Yeah, sure. So there were really 2 areas, which miraculously, with 5 of us together, only 2 is actually pretty good. So we generally agreed on things, okay? Where we kind of got a little sideways was a move to a more supportive environment. So my mom moving from her home of 60 years into a memory care community. So there was some disagreement or some just not being on the same page about that decision.
The timing, or in general, just doing the move?
Just in general.
Even doing the move.
Right, because we had taken care of my dad at home. Actually, my mom had taken care of my dad at home. Right?
Okay.
And so
the pattern was established.
Right. And there was never really an intention on the part of a few of my family members that we would do anything different with
other
my mom,
than do that.
Except my mom didn't have my dad to take care of her. So So yeah, so there was some challenges around that.
Who was doing the primary amount of care, and were their opinion given greater weight, or was it sort of not that way?
Well, it was, myself, I was doing quite a bit of the care, and then my older sister as well. And then others would plug in, just not nearly
Like
at
for
the-
respite
at the
or
rate that
a
we
little
were.
bit, or
Right,
they'd take a
right.
weekend or something like
Yeah.
that, or manage this or manage that.
Yeah, yeah.
So did everybody get an equal voice, or
I guess you could say that at the end of the day, the decision kind of got made for us in a sense, because my mom had an event that landed her in the hospital, that then landed her in rehab. And I had done my research ahead of time to make sure she got into rehab that was connected to a community that had the best, well, I had determined to be the best memory care where we lived, right? And so it became kind of a no-brainer. She could not come home from rehab. She just wasn't struggling.
were the brothers with you on that
They
at that point?
yeah, I think there was some reluctance and disappointment and oh no, and just there wasn't an outward statement of she can't go there. It was a oh no.
We thought we'd never have to do
Right,
this.
right. And so she ended up in memory care. And then after she was in memory care, there was angst, different levels of angst among family members. Was this the right decision? And the interesting thing was this. My mom and my dad were very different personality-wise. My dad, just to give you a sense, was voted Mr. Bashful or most bashful in high school, and my mom was Miss Congeniality.
How did I know that was coming?
So he was truly an introvert and didn't need people around him. She was totally an extrovert and thrived on social. So when she got into community, she actually did quite well. So I think seeing that kind of changed the tide.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So Royden, yours more solo, but you had to build a family. Whether you call it that, a made family, or a help to make choices and decisions. How did you transition from solo making choices and decisions to getting to a place where you could hear different perspectives, different points of view, so you could think things through for Martha while you were on your own, essentially?
Well, I after a while, I knew I needed help. I mean, these decisions are not easy.
Right.
They're just not easy, and I knew I needed somebody to guide me through that. So, as you said, calling a professional, people that have been here before, and I particularly found helpful online support groups. Actually worked with Carol on one of those. And our local health system had some care navigators that I could turn to. So I would highly recommend that. I just sort of made the decision that I wanted my kids to be able to live their life, not come home and, help dad out or help mom out.
Right.
They have a lot of good memories of their mom. And so it was fine. And I was glad, to be able to do that.
Yeah.
With them. So there are resources out there. Maybe take a little bit of looking, but to find a support group, find other caregivers.
When you made choices that were going to change the trajectory potentially of how things went with Martha, did you tell the kids, or did they ask, or were they curious, or was it really you were pretty much on your own and you kept it that way?
I followed their lead.
Okay.
And if they didn't want to ask about their mother, that was fine.
Okay.
It's really hard for all of us. And when they were curious, I was there. We had a traumatic event or two, and kids showed up
Okay.
for that.
For you or for Martha?
For me.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me.
Was it good for you to have them there at that moment, or was it sort of?
No, it was
Good.
It was really good.
Okay.
To
Okay.
get a
You
hug
didn't
from
ask
one of
them to
your
come
kids.
though, did you?
I told them what was going on, and they showed up.
I was going to say, you didn't ask him to come, did you? No.
I'm not really good at asking for help.
Ah, okay.
Right.
So it's a good thing you figured out how to use a professional system.
Yeah, it was for me. It was for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So professional who got called in, but you got called in sort of as the granddaughter who was a professional.
For sure.
Right. And what happened when everybody was asking you to make all these choices about all this stuff?
So it was pretty difficult. So initially, Nanny was my grandmother. We all called her Nanny. She was having a bunch of falls, and at this time, and with my professional hat on, I wasn't sure is this delirium? Is this because
Fixable? Is it something that I
Sure.
should dig in there and find out what's going on so we can fix it? And,
Exactly. So she was having some of these falls, but they were back to back for some months, right? And so I was getting phone calls from her because she was still able to make
Yeah.
some decisions on her own. So she's calling me because my dad was bossing her around. My auntie was bossing her around. You're dealing with the mind of an attorney, my dad, and a nurse, my aunt, right?
Ouch.
And so I'm here in a whole nother state.
so
as
she's
to help-
calling on the authority figure to put those people in their
to
place.
put them in their place,
There you
and
go.
I did not have that, particularly over my dad.
Yeah, of course
I did not
not.
have that
You sure
authority,
enough did.
right? And so, but I still knew she was my heart, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I was hers, and so I had, and we all had her best interest
Sure you
in
did.
heart, but different perspectives, right? And so it got to the point where can she safely still live here? And that's kind of where the discord came in because,
Where?
Aunt, who's the nurse, thought, well, we need more support, clinically
Yeah.
and gets, maybe put her in a facility.
Oh, I
and
love that phrase. Put her
Put
in
her
a facility.
These were the words used,
Yep,
right?
I'm sure they were.
Not my
That's not
words,
uncommon.
not
It's
my
a very
words.
common kind of phrasing.
Put her in a facility.
Where are we going to put her? Yeah.
For sure. And of course, she was extremely resistant on that because I'm
that's
not,
why.
this is my house and I'm fine here. But we knew that it was
That wasn't
not
true.
really safe
Yeah, that wasn't true
anymore.
anymore.
Right. And then, the one who wanted to put her in a facility didn't necessarily have the finances to do so. And as
Right.
we know, insurance doesn't really cover these
And
facilities.
it's incredibly expensive for
Incredibly
people to live in
expensive.
assisted living or memory care either way, or even IL with some support.
For sure. So who's
Yeah.
going to pay for this?
Well,
Right?
yeah.
And so, my dad thought, well, we have space here. She can come here. And it is a safe environment where he's there and my stepmother's there again. I'm long distance. But Nanny wants to stay in her own home. And so that's where
That's
the
conflict, yeah.
came in. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how did the decision get made? How did you play into that, or what did you do to help with that?
Yeah, so she had another fall after that.
okay.
And then kind of like Carolyn was talking, ended up going into rehab and then talking to other healthcare professionals. She listened a little bit and realized.
Not family.
Not
even
family.
you.
Not even me.
Oh, there you
Correct.
go. Somebody
Correct.
else.
Someone
Okay.
else.
Somebody else
And
outside the system.
someone else outside of our dynamic suggested this is not, it's
For right
not
now.
really
Why don't you
safe.
do it for right now?
For sure.
And,
And-
if if it changes, then you can head back home. But for right now,
See, you've had this conversation
well,
before
maybe.
because that was the exact conversation that we had, that it was going to be on a temporary basis. That was the understanding
Yeah.
that Nanny had. For a little while, I'll go stay with my son
That's
and
okay.
the daughter-in-law, and then I'm with the agreement that I'm going
I'll
back
be back
into
home
my house.
after that.
And
Yeah.
it never
It never
led to
actually
that.
happened.
Exactly.
But because it was stepwise, she got to that. Did your aunt get to a place where she was okay with that choice that got made, or is it still a conflict in the family?
Yes. Since then, my grandmother is deceased and my aunt right at like maybe 4
wow.
weeks later.
Oh, my.
Other things that were
Ouch.
going on. But she lived there with my parents for years before she passed away.
Right.
And so it got resolved, I guess, to a degree, because my aunt knew that she was in good hands.
Were there other care issues that repeated themselves because the aunt's the nurse and dad's the attorney? And And she should have more of a say, or did it mellow out after that one event, would you say?
It mellowed out, not after that one event.
Oh,
there were
okay.
there were tons of others in
more
between.
events. Okay,
For sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But eventually, it became more important to keep the family together and to do what was right for everybody.
Absolutely.
Than to keep fighting for something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, if you had one message you want to send out to other families who do find themselves in conflict, and this is for all of you, what would be one message as you have experienced all this and you've watched it and you've seen it? You've not only done it personally, you and even Roy, and you've done some work with other people and families and seen some of the good, bad, ugly. What would be a takeaway for somebody who's in this situation with family dynamics that are not healthy, that are not good, and we know that 4 out of 5 families come apart over dementia. What would your takeaway be for those families? Anybody?
Yeah. Oh, you go.
Okay. So for me, I would always be asking the question, is this worth ruining the ruination of your family
Of that
forever?
family member relationship.
Forever, right.
Yeah.
Because it could
Do
have
you care that much?
long-standing-
Is it that important?
Right.
Does it matter that much? And there are times when people will say,
might.
yeah, because
Right.
it's not right. What's happening to grandma, to mom, to dad, to my wife, it's not right. And I'll stand and say, I'll let go of the other relationship to honor this one. And other times people are like, I don't know, it makes that much difference now that we're down there. Let's be done. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say to call on a professional. And so again, my family assumed because I was a healthcare provider that I knew it all, and I didn't, right? Not about dementia anyway. And so that's when I started doing my own research, because I knew that they depended on me based on what I at least knew at that time. And that's how I found PAC, and, started doing some research, listened to many of your talks, came to your conferences, and became a certified too, so that I can be as much a support as I could from long distance.
Wow. And then it became something you chose to do.
It became
beyond
something
that.
I chose to do beyond that. Exactly.
I think we call those legacy projects.
Really?
Roy, what about you? What's your takeaway from the place that you are? You were in a very, very challenging place where you had parents at the same time. Your wife, unexpectedly, might I add, developed a young onset dementia, and you were not having family discord because there wasn't family involved. They were all, the people you would have possibly had conflict with were all experiencing their own dementias.
Yeah. Something you said, I'll echo. Dementia is not content to take the life of the person living with it. It really wants to take the whole family down. And once you realize that, you understand what you're dealing with. It's a bigger foe than you might have thought. I would encourage people to step back and ask yourself, how is mom doing? How is Martha doing? And it's not true in every case, but in most cases, I mean, you look at Martha and you know what? She doesn't care who the president is. She doesn't care about, things that we watch on the news.
What are the 3 things that I just asked you about? It's no longer on her agenda.
So when you look at her life and you realize she's pretty much content, then a lot of these things, I don't know that we need to battle over. What really is important is how is the family dealing with it? Because if we don't deal with our own sadness and emotional pain, then that's when the family falls apart. But if we can step back and say, well, she's actually okay. Let's let it go.
Let's leave it where it is right now. Let's
just leave
move to this place because she's not okay. Let's try something different.
Right.
Cool. Thank you all.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.